Hello and welcome back. We're continuing our series on Python certification, and we're going to start into now looking at classes within Python. And so we're going to dive into it today, get some basic definitions, and then we're going to go forward into, we do inheritance and a lot of other good stuff. So there'll be several class-related, Python class and object-related discussions. But this is the first one. We're just going to get started. So right now we've got a very simple class. When you want to create a class in Python, is you just use the class keyword. So I've got a class. I'm going to call it simple. And now what a class can do, and without getting too deep into it, and there'll be some show notes, some links if you want to go a little deeper in classes. But classes have attributes and they have methods, or properties and methods. So what I've created here is, I'm going to do this. This will be a class properties. And then I'll come down here and do class methods. And let me do this. And I'm also going to do define, display, value, print display plus value. Okay, we'll keep that very simple. No pun intended. All right, so let's see what it complains about here. Oh, okay. It wanted an extra line in there for formatting, which is fine. To sort of basically it wants this extra. This is a formatting thing around the class itself. Anyways, back to that. So a class has properties, which are things, which are values that an instance stores, and they have methods, which are functions essentially that you can call on that class and its properties. In this case, we've got a very simple we've got one property that we're just going to call it my name. And we're going to define it. We're going to assign it a value here by default. And then we've got one method, which is display. And it's going to print out my name. Now notice here, we have our sort of normal definition. We have that basically built in. So we have def space and then the name. But any class level method is going to start with self. And so I'm going to actually put a second one here to show how this works. So if I do display to comma value, and here is the value, and we'll just force it to string, whatever it happens to be. So both of these are methods. Display and display to are both methods of the simple class. And in the one case, we're not going to send it anything. We'll see how that looks in a second. In the other, we're going to send it a value. And so to create an instance, well, let's first do this. Let's move this up. So if we just take simple, the class, and try to call display, which does not have a self, we are going to, so this is class example, 3, class example. And we're going to see here that it's missing a positional argument, self. So it requires something. However, let's create a variable of type class, which is as easy as this. So we just do simple, and we're going to do simple, get the class name. Notice that we've got the case sensitivity there. And then if we use a class name with no parameters, by default, that's going to use the default constructor. We'll talk about those a little bit later. And let's go ahead and then on that variable of class, type class simple, now we're going to call it, and notice we're still not going to send a parameter. And let's see what that does. And now we see that it works. It does I am simple, because by default, what it's going to do, or the way it's constructed, is self means I need to call this on an instance. I need to create a variable, an instance of the class first, and then do it. So if I create one more, if I just do a static here, I'm going to say print, let's see what it says. So now if I do simple.display, it's probably going to complain, and it complains here. You see that simple.display, it requires a positional argument of self. Oh, probably because, let's do display 3. Just to be sure that we're calling the right one. And let's not do it. We'll deal with display 2 in a minute. So display 3. So now we can see I can't do display without any because it actually ends up overriding. So if I do this, what happens is further down, I'm basically redeclaring this now with a new signature. But if I call this display 3, then I can actually call that on the class. And this may even show. So I can, well, yeah, it doesn't help me which is static and which is not. So this would be something I can call at the class. But if I try to do print self.name, or I'm sorry, my name, then it's going to give me an error because self is not defined. It's not defined for the class level. It's only at an instance. So I have to have an instance in order to have properties. So I can do some stuff up at store functions up on a class, and they're called static because those are at the class level. Those are any class, the class will always have those available. However, it cannot use the properties within the class because those require an instance. So let's go back and look at this. So I do want to cover this, is that notice that because this is my name, self also, if you come out of the world of like a Java or C#, you may think of that also as this. I think Visual Basic maybe uses self. But basically it says that I want to go to whatever this instance is, I want to display the property value for this instance. And now we can come here, and if we do display 2, I'm going to show that one real quick. Now here, because this self is already part of it, because I'm doing simple.display2, then I just give it a value. So I'm going to give it a value of my value. And then we're going to see that this one comes through. I am simple, and here's a value. And you can see that it's my value. So I use self to get the instance level, but I can use if I don't use self, it's going to take the local value. So if I add, which can sometimes get confusing, so if I do value equals, let's see, first value, then what we'll see here, let's see, and let's just do print self.value. Whoop. Whoop. Self.value. Okay. So what we're going to see here is it does what we originally saw. So it does take value. It uses this value here, but I can distinguish. I want to use the property level value here, and I get where it says first value. So that gives me properties and the ability to access them. Now you may say so far, okay, cool. What good does any of this do for me? Because, well, let's say I put all this stuff together. Why do I have a class instead of just leave these as functions and variables? Well, what I can do here is I can do simple2 equals simple. And now this is where I start working with it. So now I can access these properties. So I can do simple2 dot my name equals, let's see, second instance. And now if I do simple 2.display, then I'm going to see something different. Let's just do this. Let's get a couple spaces in there just because. So now this second instance, we've gone in and we created it. We have another instance, so we have simple and simple 1. Now this time we're going to go in and we're going to set the name on simple 2 to something different and then do a display, and we'll see here, boom, second instance. So we could also do simple 2 dot value equals another value, and then if we do this, let's just leave it my value because I'm passing the same value in. Then we're going to see here, so second instance, and here's my value, and we can see another value there for the value because we've set that out. We've assigned that. So we have the ability to work with these things as an instance, individually. So we can work with one for a while, we can work differently with another. We can have a series, so we could use these to store things. So we could have like, let's say we had an address class that would have a city, state, zip, and then we can do stuff with it, and we could actually have multiple addresses. And then we can do things like, let's say, I want to do just print. And here I'm going to do print, which is basically the same as, well, we'll just keep it as display. So now I could do, let's split this guy up real quick. And I'm going to do simple 3. And then simple 3 dot, I have to spell it right. My name equals third. I'll just call it I am third. And then I can do an array. So let's just do instances equals, I call it so simple 2, comma simple 3. And then I can do for item in instances. And I'm going to be able to call that. So for each one, I can do item.display. And then we're going to see here at the end, simple, second, and third. So I can wheel and deal with these. I can do stuff here where I can actually call that display on each of these. Now, if I wanted to do something that doesn't have a display, let's do, just to show that. So if I do class, let's see, simple, call it less simple. Oops, sorry, don't need that. And then I'm just going to call, let's see, I'm going to keep the same values. Let's do it this way. Let's actually give it a display 3 even. And not display 3, we'll give it display 2. So let's say that, so let's say that we have here, so less simple is just simple, less simple value. And so now I can do all of the same stuff, and I can create simple 4. Less simple. And if I try to do it here, let's see what happens. So note that we're calling display, but simple, less simple does not have that, it does not have a display that has been defined for it. So here, boom, less simple object has no attribute display. Now we're going to find out how we can do some things like that and have classes relate to each other, but that will be next time around. We're going to cover that in another one. I do want to cover the init. We'll put it down here. So if we do define init self, this is a constructor, which means that, and it's a no argument constructor. So here, when I create this, when I do this, it fires off a constructor. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say print constructor called, and then let me change these two things here. So I'm going to change here. So I'm going to say self dot my name. So let's say I just, by default, I'm going to set these things to some simple values of, this is just, I'm clearing this thing out. So I don't have any values on it. So now if I do this and run it, I want to get rid of, I don't want to call you anymore. So now we can see here that the constructor is called. And then when we come in here and call display, if we go back and look at display just does my name, but there's nothing there. And then the display, and it calls display 2 with my value. Well, my name is blank, so see, it doesn't have that. And here's the value, and so that still comes through. But if I do the value after that, there's a blank. So I could do, let's just call, so if I make it a little easier, if I do that default name and default value, then I'm going to see those default name, and so I don't have to declare these guys here, or I can just say something like this. I can say this is what I default to, and now I can do I can also do val1, val2, and in this case my name equals val1, value equals val2. And so if I want to initialize, so now this would be uninitialized, but then I can turn around and do, and let's do these at the end. So let's see, let's just do it this way. So this is going to be default, well, let's do uninit equals that, and then if I display it, but now if I do uninit, but now if I do initialized, now I can give it simple init name and init value, and then if I do init display, let's see. Oh, and here's the problem, is that I don't have both, so it doesn't like that. So if I do this, empty and empty, let's see what that does. And what you're probably going to see is that this is going to get overwritten. We see that from time to time. Let's see. Yeah, and so see here, where it takes one positional argument, but 3 were given. So what we have to do is, this goes back to what we saw before, is that I need to allow it to be, let's just do default and default. And so now, because I've set those up, I can actually call both of these. And we can see here that here's where it gets the default, and here's where it gets to, and here is where it gets a init name. So when we create constructors, we're going to basically build some default values out, and in this case that allows us to call it with no values or with name values, much as we saw when we went into some of the discussion about functions. So that's the basics of a class and an instance, and we're going to get much more into this moving forward, but I think that probably is a good stopping point for today. So we'll let you get back to it. As always, there'll be source code repository is out there. We have links in the show notes so that you can get to that. You can see these, you can play around them and do whatever you want with them. We also have links to some additional information if you want to learn some more about classes and Python classes in particular. If you have any questions, as always, shoot us an email at info@developernerd.com, and that'll wrap it up. So, as always, go out there, have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time.